Who should we fear more? A cryptid such as Bigfoot or a Dogman, things that most people don't believe in. Or should we fear other human beings more? I'm a retired truck driver, and like most over-the-road truckers, I would stay on the interstate, except for those times where I took an exit for fuel, food, or some other necessity. I can probably list 100 different reasons why it's always better to just stay on the interstate, at least as much as possible. One of the reasons for avoiding a different route, like a state-owned road, is that some of the towns that these less-traveled roads run through can be pretty problematic. I've driven through some of these towns, and it's not like there's any warning signs. You don't get a heads up. You sometimes don't know what kind of place you just stopped in until you're knee-deep in trouble. And there's times that you can't judge a town based on what you see. You pretty much have to rely on your instincts. I've been through a few towns that look like they came straight out of the movie Deliverance. But looks can be deceiving, and sometimes those towns that look all run down have sometimes been safer than the other towns that were much higher up the socio-economic ladder. The point is that you just can't tell by any outward visible sign. You just have to hope you instinctually pick up on the danger. Whatever you're feeling in your gut is always going to be more important than anything you see. So, back in 1997, I was returning home from being on the road a little too long. I was tired, and I needed a break from the road, and I think that burning need to get home dulled my instincts a little bit. It was about 1 a.m. when I came up on some detour signs. I don't know whether it was nighttime road construction or a bad accident, but I had no choice but to take the detour. If I had a chance to do it over again, I would definitely pull over and just wait it out until morning. But like I said, at the time I was really eager to get home. The detour was on a road I've never been on before. I don't recall which one it was, but it was a state highway in northern Indiana, and I still had more than a 6-hour drive before I got home. So as I'm going down this state road and keeping an eye out for signs, I see a truck stop. It wasn't a big one like I usually visit. It was a small, older truck stop, and kind of run down. But it was the only place that I'd passed in a while, and I really hoped that they had some fresh coffee. And thankfully they did. I do remember that. Getting that big coffee was the last thing I did before getting the shock of my life. Well, I went inside and I got what I wanted, and was about to hop back into the cab with my coffee when I heard a voice behind me. The voice told me, "Don't do anything stupid. Act normal." The voice then said, "I don't want to kill you, bud. Just give me your cash." I'll never forget him calling me bud. That's a weird thing to say to a guy you're about to rob and whose life you're threatening. I didn't want to spook the guy, so I didn't turn around. So I didn't know what kind of weapon he had. I figured that I'd better cooperate until I know what I'm up against. I think I probably had about $600 in cash on me, and that's certainly not worth losing your life over. I told the guy that I was going to take my money out, but he said, "No, I'll get it." And then he told me not to move and asked me which pocket. I guess my mind must have been racing, because as simple as his question was, it felt like it confused me. I didn't understand what he meant. Well, he got upset and he started cussing me out. He angrily hissed at me, "Front or back? Right or left? Are you stupid?" I calmly answered him, "Front right pocket. It's a money clip," I told him. Then, as if perfectly timed, like in a movie, a noise got the man's attention and stopped him, and it also got my attention. It was a loud crack or snap, and then a really loud growl. I couldn't imagine what it was. The next thing I know, the man who was robbing me landed about 30 feet away from my truck, thrown by something. A few seconds later, I saw what threw the man, and I swear that it looked like it could have been a werewolf. It was an upright, hair-covered human body with the head of a canine. It was all or mostly black, and it had the most intelligent eyes I'd ever seen on any animal. When I looked into its eyes, I felt like I was looking into the eyes of something far more knowledgeable than any human. It looked at me briefly, and I felt like it already understood the gratitude I had without me even saying a word. And then it just walked into the trees, and I got up into my cab, still trying to wrap my mind around what just happened. I sat there for a few minutes, still not believing what I witnessed. The guy who was robbing me had already taken off. He took off running as soon as he saw the creature. I think he might have been scared straight that night. Then a thought shot into my head, and I decided to empty out my mini fridge as a thank you to the creature. And I put all the food down on a concrete bumper block in an empty parking space, right where I saw it walk into the trees. I waited, but I didn't see it take the food. I gave up after about 15 minutes. But when I went to roll out, I glanced at the spot before leaving, and all the food was gone. People can believe whatever they want. I 100% believe that I had a brush that night with what people call a dogman, and that creature saved my life. What happened to me is evidence enough for me, at least, that all dogmen are unique, and this one was heroic. Signed, Mike Z. In 2017, I was 13 years old, on my way home from school, and I decided to cut through the woods that day. That wasn't anything unusual for me. I bet I walked through those woods thousands of times. It was only about a 20-minute walk, and perfectly safe. At least I'd never seen anything that bothered me. At least not until that one day in October. I was about halfway through when I noticed that a big tree had fallen right across the path. The tree hadn't been down the last time I was there, which was only about a week before. So I was looking at the fallen tree, trying to decide whether to go around it or climb over it, when suddenly I didn't care about any tree. I was focused on something else. I started to hear grunting, huffing, and growling. I immediately thought about a kid I knew named Chad. He was known by everyone for his pranks, and he'd recently made me a target of those pranks. He knew that I frequently cut through the woods, so I figured it was him messing with me. I really did believe that. So I said loudly, "Knock it off, Chad. Enough already." And that's when I heard a snapping sound, and I turned around. I was expecting Chad to jump out from his hiding place. But what I saw instead nearly made me faint. What stood in front of me was a really tall and muscle-bound beast. I don't know how tall it was exactly, but it towered over me. Granted, I was only about 5 feet tall at the time, but I realized that it was so tall that it also would have towered over my dad, and he's 6'3". I don't know why, I can't really explain it, but I kinda had this duh thing going on. I mean, of course I know about Bigfoot, but for some reason, Bigfoot never crossed my mind, at least not while it was happening. That didn't occur to me until later. It had kind of an egg-shaped head, with long hair on the top sprouting out, and it looked matted in spots. And I noticed that there were large patches of hair missing from its arm and chest area. Its eyes were small, and its nose was large and flat. I'm not trying to be funny, but it smelled like shit. It really did, and it made me gag. It stared at me for a few seconds, and then it punched itself in the chest and screamed at me. It was almost like the roar of a lion. I was so terrified that I wet my pants, and I was so afraid that I couldn't move, so I just stood there and cried. I thought I was going to die. All I could think about was that I would never see my family again. It took a step towards me, and then a loud howl came from behind me, and I felt something go over my head. I didn't know what it was or what was happening. For a second, I thought it was a huge bird because I hadn't seen it yet. But then it landed and stopped right in front of me. I could only see the back of it. Its black hair, the outline of its head and ears, and its tail. And then I saw that it was also some really tall and muscle-bound creature, and that it had legs that were bent in a weird way. I heard what I thought was its bones popping as I watched it take a step towards the first creature. Then it hit me with its arm. Not with its hand, but with its arm. Like when you clothesline someone, or when you brake hard in a car and put your arm across. I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I think it was just pushing me out of the way. I fell to the ground, and I remember how frightened I was by the second creature's claws. They were black and so sharp-looking, and the tips came to points. It reminded me of a cat's claws, only much bigger and longer. I've never seen any animal leap the way this thing did. It took a leap over the other creature and landed on the other side of it, and as it was leaping over the creature, it took a swipe at it, ripping the skin open on its chest, arms, and neck. In one swipe, that creature was a bloody mess. But the Bigfoot was totally unfazed by the injuries. It didn't even seem to flinch. At this time, several minutes had passed, giving me a little time to mentally take in these creatures. After getting past my refusal to believe that any of this was real, I looked over at the injured Bigfoot, thinking that it did kind of remind me of a cross between a primate and a really big man. And the second creature kind of looked like a massive black German shepherd, and the way that it moved and its eyes and behaviors, well, it all felt kind of human to me. My thoughts were suddenly broken when the dog creature let out a howl that I thought would make my eardrums rupture. And then it went at the Bigfoot again, punching and clawing it, and now the Bigfoot looked like it might be in shock. But I was wrong about that, because a couple of seconds later it lunged at the dog thing, hitting it over and over and screaming. But the dog creature lunged back at it, this time attacking the Bigfoot's head, and the Bigfoot's eye looked so torn up that I wouldn't be surprised if it was blinded by the claws of the dog-like creature. Then, as suddenly as this crazy and terrifying scenario began, it apparently was over. I guess the Bigfoot decided that it was outmatched, and it ran off into the woods, pushing trees over as it made its way off to my right. Then the dog-like creature let out another loud howl. It seemed to me like it was a howl to declare victory, like it was very proud of itself for defeating the Bigfoot. That's when whatever trust I may have felt for the dog-like creature disappeared, and it was replaced by fear. Now that the other creature was gone, I wondered if it would attack me. It took a few steps towards me, and I'm sure that I was cowering in fear, but it didn't attack me. And I don't know how, but somehow I knew that it had no intention of harming me. Maybe it was wishful thinking, or my instincts, or the way it was looking at me, but somehow I just knew. After looking at me for a few seconds, the creature then ran off in the same direction as the Bigfoot went. The boy that I mentioned earlier, Chad, well, as time went on, he and I dated, and one day I told him about my experience. I really didn't think that he would believe me, but he did. And that's when Chad told me that his dad had seen the creatures. And then Chad and his dad told me what they knew about them. I knew about the Bigfoot, of course, but I didn't know that there were different types of them. We spent that whole day talking about cryptids and looking at stuff online. Before that day in the woods when it happened to me, I didn't think that Bigfoot was real, and I didn't even know about Dogman yet. But now I can say that I know that cryptids aren't just for creepypasta videos, and all Bigfoot aren't friendly, and all dogmen aren't evil. The truth is, until it happens, you can't say how things will go. So it's best to always be careful, and it's also smart not to leave yourself defenseless. I know that if it ever happens to me again, I won't be caught completely off guard, and I will have something to protect myself. Signed, Shayna. Okay, guys, that's it for tonight, but I'll see you in a few days. Have a great night, everyone.